Nathan, do we want to restart the recording? Perfect. Thank you. Okie dokie, right. Hopefully everybody's refreshed. I've been charging head torches and filling my bath with water. So let's move on to item number 5. We have got our integrated performance and quality report. So I will invite David to take us through this, and then obviously we'll have the opportunity for questions as well. So over to you, David.
Thanks, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. You'll find the IPQR summary report in the pack with around pages 83 to 126 for the combined papers. Again, as you've heard from the summaries today, they've been through FRP, clinical governance and staff governance committees prior to coming to committee today. The executive summary is in page 84. Just maybe for your summation, there are 11 items of the 19 that are meeting target or are within 5% of target. There's only 3 items in red, but good to see 2 of those are making improvements in the right direction. A few highlights, and then I'll open it up to questions. The CAMS you'll see is just below target, but obviously huge improvements through this year. And our Gell-Impute, which is skewing the number slightly, are in very much sustained action with regard to making further reductions, which will bring our overall totals hopefully into the right zone. We then hopefully again can maintain that to be able to get into that de-escalation process that we would like to do. So there are ongoing conversations about what the process for that will be, but that certainly is our aim. Vaccinations, you'll see an update with improving COVID performance. Note that the flu performance is comparing to last year. This is the data only up to the end of November. So there's more data to be added to that, but it looks as though that's on a trajectory to make improvements from last year, but again remains an area of focus for us. Fiona referred to the pressures in our systems, which very often can be most keenly seen in our ED performance. Although the chart is showing improvement from the previous reported period, then it's still reporting prior to Christmas New Year period, where again we are very challenged and we know we're in a very pressured situation at the moment. While it's small consolation that we are performing better than other boards, the pressure within our own system is very keenly felt by our staff and the patients who use our service. Delayed discharges has shown again some improvement in the report, but still remains, it's probably gone up since then at about 225 as of last week. So it's still in that very challenging space for us. Outpatients and TTG is an area of huge scrutiny for us. We are on weekly calls with government in regard to our performance. Our performance has been good. The focus again has been on reducing waits for those waiting over 52 weeks. And the team have been very active in that space and negotiating with government with some additional monies that we've been able to secure, as well as reprovisioning monies that had previously been allocated into areas where we're seeing gaps. So great progress. The national teams are very pleased with our progress, but it's still into this very testing time, particularly when the system is as pressured. Cancer pathways performance has improved since the last report, with 31 days now above target as reported, and also improvements within our SACT performance, which is very beneficial for our patients. Pages 109 to 118, you've got the data related to our clinical performance, some of which we talked about earlier, and that includes, of course, complaints, SERs, falls, and tissue viability. And then final section is around our staff and organisational metrics, which there is a continual, if somewhat gradual, progress in regard to training compliance. but appraisals, as we've mentioned, still is relatively flat. That will conclude my opening remarks. Happy to open up to questions for folks, and my fellow execs no doubt will help in making responses to you. So if I can invite your questions, thanks. Go ahead, Bert.
Thank you, David. It's just regarding the stage 2 complaint activity and the comment by Boyd that the performance is not sustainable. And I know that we've talked about this previously at board meetings, and I know there's been work underway to try and improve performance. But just reading the comment about the performance not being sustainable, I wonder if there's anything else that's being planned to try and improve upon this. Thank you.
Thanks for Captain Boyd.
Yeah, thanks. I think that really is a comment aimed at saying that there will need to be other efforts because we would not want this situation, these data to persist. I think the best colleagues to describe these efforts to get the data to read better are the chief officers, and I would look to them to perhaps comment to you just now, if available, about what these efforts are. I see at least one chief officer hand up just now. I take the liberty of inviting Arlene to come in on that.
Yeah, thank you, Boyd. So we are within the partnership doing a focused piece of work around about our complaints, both from an operational perspective of how do we ensure that staff have the time to investigate the complaint and write a response, as well as doing some work with, I think, Louise, about the quality of the complaints and the responses that we send out to people. We've put in an additional meeting where we've got additional oversight of the timeline so that we can work our way backwards from those that are currently been waiting the longest for a response. Those are usually individuals with very complex complaints that sit across lots of different departments, and that's requiring a bit of coordination. Previously, we had, I guess, left that at frontline level for people to coordinate. We're now taking a more active role in that to see if that actually helps move that along quicker by us having that more coordinated effort and role. So we're hopeful that new oversight process has only started in the last 3 or 4 weeks. So we're hopeful that over the next few weeks, we will start to see a difference in the data and the timelines, particularly the length of time that some people have to wait for a response to their complaint.
Thanks, Arlene. Catherine?
Yeah, similar to Arlene, many of the actions that are being taken within the partnership are similar within acute, particularly in relation to training, offering training and support for those that are writing the complaint, so that we can get it right first time and we don't have to do quite so many rewrites as we're taking it through the process. But I would say that since our last board meeting, there is evidence of improvement, particularly in the numbers reducing within acute. So the efforts that are being taken to address the number waiting has been quite impressive and is making an impact on the number that are outstanding and awaiting a complaint response.
I'll invite Evan to come in and then I'll come back to you, Bert, as I see you put your hand back up.
Thanks, David. Just to complete the hat trick from an RGMD perspective, very, very similar situation. We're kind of working through our clinical governance structure to improve both the quality and the timelines around complaints. Real challenges around the number of complaints, and particularly as some of our capacity challenges start to bite, but also kind of a kind of new direction in terms of people progressing their complaints through the MSP system as well, which adds a complexity. But yeah, similar comments to like other chief officers.
Thanks. Bert, can I come back to you?
Yes, thanks for these responses. I mean, I think it's very difficult. There's quite a backlog of complaints, and the other thing to note is there are more complaints coming in and being opened up than there are complaints being closed off. So really just to record that there is work to be done, and I appreciate the updates that have been provided in relation to that. Thank you.
Thanks, Bert. And, I think ultimately in the description that we've given to you with regard to our response in terms from a management point of view, then obviously that needs to be seen in the numbers. So hopefully you'll see that. Now, I do just reminder that what is coming to the board is going back to November and some date. So you will see a lag in board reports. But perhaps what we can look at is if we are seeing those signs, is be able to give some update in between times. So yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Emily, can I come to you, please?
Thanks, David. My first question is around NDAS. I know there's a target of trying to reduce the numbers on the waiting list by March 26, but considering the comments that are made alongside that appears no longer realistic. I just wondered if there is any prospect of reduction or if there's a new target for that. And related to that, I can see there's obviously still people being added to the waiting list each quarter. What's being communicated to those individuals, given that the likelihood of them actually moving up the list is pretty low at this point? So that's probably one for Catherine. And then my usual plea or question around appraisals, just struggling to see why that's not moving and just looking for an update on what's being done around that, which is probably one for Gareth. Thank you.
Okay, I'll come to Catherine first around NDAS.
Yeah, so as you'll be aware, Emily, from the discussions that you'll have heard me and presentations, there is a lot of work going on across Highland Council and also NHS Highland services in relation to redesigning the NDAS service. We are, as the report states, offering some private assessments. And obviously that comes at a cost, and we need to try to find the resource for that internally within NHS Highland. The redesign process, it's really important that we get it right, and we're working very closely. I was on a call on Friday afternoon with the Chief Exec of the Council, who's taken a keen interest in this, and working with education colleagues around how we get a different design system. We are also aware that the Scottish Government is looking to provide some resource into the coming year to support NDAS services and redesign of services, and obviously with a view to reducing waiting lists. So we have that all in hand. How likely is it that we will have everything into place by the end of March? I would say that's highly unlikely to have the whole redesign in place, and this is going to be a transformational redesign that will take time for us to implement. But I would hope that we will see a number of children that do get assessments between now and the end of March.
Thank you.
Thanks. Catherine, I suppose just if I can add a reminder to everyone that what's clear is that people who are on this waiting list are not sitting without support and help. So that absolutely is happening. And one of the questions that we've got is, this is almost a historic pathway in many respects, and actually not fully representative of what actually the service is, how the service is running and what it's providing. And so we'll have a reflection a little bit on whether we can devise metrics which aren't necessarily going to be easy, hence the reason of delay in getting to it, that might actually be more representative and give assurance in regard to what support and how much support is being given. So we'll take that away. Gareth, I'm going to come to you, but as I say, I caveat this by recognising this is all our joint responsibilities with regard to appraisals, but I don't know if you want to say anything.
Yeah, happy to come in. I think just in similar style to the clinical governance and complaints aspects around this, there's a responsibility of each of the directors to progress this, and we've got widely varying performance across the organisation, but obviously our overall average is impacted by probably where they're skewed to some extent by where the biggest staff groups are. So again, that tends to be in the chief officer's areas. So that there's two strands to this. One is this being embedded in our performance management, and progressing that through oversight of performance in each area. And again, that our responsibility is to focus on that. The other aspect we're looking at corporately is, from a corporate support perspective, is a systematic approach over the next year with our change partners to work through each of the areas and teams to try and get under the skin and understand if there's any other barriers that really we need to be aware of. So I think it's both required, a focus on this from a management perspective, where we can shift that, and that needs to be, I suppose, prioritized if we want to see some change in that space. Certainly, speaking for myself, my areas, I've asked my team to look at an improvement plan. We've got again, I've got 4 functions which are widely varying in terms of their performance. The bigger function at the moment, I'm aware of what the issues are, and that's what's dragging down our percentage in our area. And that's following significant redesign work that's being undertaken in one of the functions. We're moving through that now, so I expect to see that changing over the course of the next year. So I'm aware it's work I need to progress. But I'll be looking to others to come in to comment on aspects they are focusing on in terms of their improvements in their areas.
Thank you. I mean, I think in a practical sense, over these last, over the last month, this is not the time of year where you would be pushing appraisals in terms of timing, given a large holiday period as well as an extremely busy system. But I think the point is well made in terms of to see sustained improvement over this. And that's definitely very much part of our performance reviews that we're having as an ADG, and will remain a focused area. Alex, can I bring you in, please?
Yeah, thanks, David. I've got a question for Catherine, and then I want to talk a little bit about appraisals as well. Catherine, in terms of the return outpatient, clearly it's getting worse, and we know to a degree why it's getting worse, because of the political and our focus on bringing the 52-week wait down. Is there a risk that there's a tipping point here where we're going to end up in a situation where the return outpatient waiting list becomes a real problem in getting onto the 52-week waiting list, because that's going up hard and fast as it stands? And then, Gareth, in terms of the appraisal completion form, in the note at the end, you say that bank, medical and dental employees are excluded from the data. Now, bank I can understand, but medical and dental, and why is that excluded? And what sort of percentage are we actually talking about in terms of numbers that could be in that list? I won't go into the need for improvement, because that's clear and that's obvious. Thanks.
Medical and dental is dealt with under a different system, a different set of terms and conditions. So we're focusing this data is specifically around Agenda for Change staff and the appraisal process for Agenda for Change staff.
Okay. Right.
So their appraisal process is a different type of appraisal, and it's done separately, and that's why it's not recorded under these settings. Catherine, did you want to come in with regard to returns?
Yeah, I mean, the numbers on the returns waiting list is going up in terms of real terms, but that is not to be unexpected when we are cutting through the waiting lists at the rate that we're cutting through them, because we know there's a conversion rate from new to outpatients. And I just want to make clear that we are not delivering on return waiting lists and converting that capacity to new, to just to be sure about that. That is we go with our clinical decision making around what is added to a return waiting list. But there is certainly more work to do in terms of really addressing the impact of what we're doing around and seeing a higher volume of new patients, and then how we manage the capacity response to that on the return outpatient waiting list, which, as we know, there are all sorts of different initiatives in train that we can apply to that. But at the moment, it doesn't surprise me to see that number going up, and it is something, Alex, that we need to monitor, keep an eye on, and ensure we've got a response to that.
Thanks, Kath.
Okay, thank you. If I can keep going, I'm conscious of time. Sorry, Chair, for keeping this going. But Janice.
Yeah. So just three different points. I'll try and be quick. Round about the complaints, I just wonder whether we're really pushing the care opinion, because really part of the ethos of that is to avert complaints, because you're dealing with stuff in real time, you're getting the real information, and I just wonder whether we have wider data that links the two, you know, maybe some health boards that are particularly pushing care opinion, and does that alter the amount of complaints, and whether that's a better approach than trying to speed up our response. I don't know. So it's just a thought. Round about the vaccines, I just noticed the difference between healthcare staff. Both are low, and social care staff, and the uptake of vaccines. And I just think at a community level, these are all, our staff are also our champions for vaccines. So what work are we doing to really target that and change a mindset there? And lastly, round about appraisals, I think it's really welcome, Gareth, that we're looking, we want more. I think what we don't have is any real data or metrics that tell us what the cause of the, you know, so we've got lots of theories. The timing's one that you mentioned, David. I wonder whether an annual process at a set time might be better, as them to done that. But I think how we collect that data and what the actual reasons they're not getting done will help us have a more targeted approach to our solutions round about appraisals. So I definitely welcome that approach. That's me. Thanks,
Janice. I see Jennifer's got her hand up to talk to you about vaccinations first. Jennifer.
Thank you. Yes, and I'm glad that was highlighted, actually, because I can only apologise, but that isn't the latest data that we've got. And actually, from the autumn-winter flu programme, we've actually done particularly well, and we've exceeded the Scottish average at the final count, which was to, I believe, 25th of January in the data I just looked at. So we've achieved a 55.6 against a 55.4. So it's only marginal, but still pretty good. And I'd also echo that the staff vaccination programme, we've exceeded the Scottish average on that. Now, I would still take on board your point, it's less than 50%. We're at 43.8 against a 41.8 national average. So still some ways to go, but each year it looks slightly different, and there is always a debrief that comes in after the end of the programme to try and learn and understand what worked well and what didn't work well. Now, that work hasn't yet been completed, but I think it would be helpful to have that maybe circulated or presented at some point, so that we can continually learn about what's working and what isn't working for us.
Thanks, Jennifer. Gareth, did you want to refer to appraisals again, and then I'll come to Louise?
So I've made the points, I think, in terms of what we're trying to achieve. I do think there's commentary needed by other colleagues in relation to their specific areas as well. So just from my perspective, I'm 54% on completion. So I've got work to be doing. So it varies from about 73% down to around 30 to 40% in my area. So I know I've got work to do to focus on that, and I'll be pushing that with my teams. I think whilst we can dig under the skin and find out what some of the reasons are, I do think it's imperative for us to be driving this as well.
Yeah, Catherine, did you want to come in?
Yeah, happy to come in just to support the discussion and to provide reassurance that, you know, we have performance management arrangements in place within the acute system that is led by our heads of ops for the various sections within acute, the senior managers. And all areas are well appraised of the situation with the need to improve around appraisal rates and actually respond and ensure that people have the time prioritised to actually undertake appraisals. So just to provide that reassurance to the board that the direction that Gareth is setting in his role is certainly being picked up within the acute sector.
Thanks, Catherine. And the final question you had, Janice, was around care opinion, and I completely agree with you in terms of if we can encourage good feedback as opposed to complaint, it can be more responsive and more balanced than what complaints would be. I also think there is something for us to consider about how we deal with people's concerns when they raise them, so that we can make connections as opposed to allowing things to go into formal complaint. And that there is a bit of a, I'm sure there's a bit of a cultural thing as part of that. There's probably also a time element to that too, where it can be deferred. I know Louise and the team, that's one of the areas that they're exploring at the moment and saying, are we getting the best out of care opinion, and whether we can do more in that space. So I think that's an area where we are looking at to see if we can expand the use of it. I mean, there are many views around whether care opinion is the right system or not and so on, and it's got its limitations, but nonetheless, it's a tool that we have. It's nationally one that's been identified, and it's certainly one that we're exploring. Okay, Karen, can I come to you, please?
I'm afraid we're back to measles, David. I've taken the time to refresh myself on the Agenda for Change handbook, which I hadn't read for some time, but I hadn't looked at the Scottish version. So I think that's something that maybe those of us that haven't done that might be worth just doing. I do think that the points that have been made this morning, I caveat this by saying I recognise the operational pressures. We've discussed that a lot today. However, this is a 12-month number, where 32% is 12 months. So we're not talking about what's happened this month. We're not talking about what's happened last month. We're talking about what's happened over a 12-month period. I also recognise that there are parts of our service that are not included in this number for the reasons that have been outlined around their different types of appraisals. However, I think that we've got a question as a board around what is it we're actually asking for. This 32% isn't really telling us the story, I don't think, and I think you've articulated that just in the way that you've explained what's happening in the various areas. This is certainly not directed at Gareth. This is about all of the areas. So I think we have some work to do around the narrative. I think we need to be clearer as a board about what's the question that we're asking and why. What do we want to see, and how do we want to? Why are we asking the questions that we're continually asking around appraisals? Because for us, and we talk about it a lot. For us, it's about the experience of the staff within our organisation and the benefit of appraisal, and that's really well articulated in the Agenda for Change handbook. And that's evidence based. For it, it's the evidence that we've got, it's the policy that we've got, and the knowledge and skills framework is there for us all to be using for those of us that are in that job family. So I think there is some work for us to do as a board to ensure that we're asking the right question of executives and their subsidiary department leads. But I think that there is definitely a different way to tell the story when it comes to the data, and I would certainly welcome that, because I think we should be celebrating and learning from the areas where it's recognising that this performance development review is there for a reason, and if it's not happening in some areas, what do they need to do? How do we help them to do that better? And I think that's the ongoing story that I would like to hear more about. The 32% is, it's just a number, it's a target. The fact that it goes up to 35 and goes back to 30 is sort of irrelevant. It's what's happening in the areas where there are outliers, and what can we do to help that. I think that's something that I certainly would be really keen to see more or hear more about. Thanks.
Thanks, Karen, and appreciate that these thoughts. Obviously, this is a topic we'll take away from the board here. We're getting you're explaining your thoughts around this very clearly, so we will take that away and consider a response. Jerry,
David,
Sarah, did you want to come in at this point?
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to come in on the appraisal point, because I've been listening carefully to the questions and comments around appraisals. I think Karen, you've laid that out very nicely, I suppose, what is at the nub of this. So if members are content, what I'm going to propose is that we take an action for, in the first instance, I would say probably myself, Gareth, and probably Philip as chair of staff governance, if we take this away, picking up all the questions and comments that people have made today, and just have a discussion offline about actually maybe what do we want to do differently in terms of how we present to committee and board is something. I think, Karen, you've laid out there. We've got some data, but you know that there's not quite matching with what members are looking for in terms of that assurance. So I'm going to suggest that the three of us have an initial conversation offline. We'll pull together. I've taken some notes, and then we can sort of see if that gives us, as you said, Karen, does that tell us a better story? Does that give us what we're looking for? Because there's just something a bit misaligned at the moment. I think if members are content, we can record that as an action today. Okay, lovely. Thank you. Sorry, David. Thanks.
No, thanks very much. Thank you. Jerry, can I come to you?
Thank you, David. Probably one observation, which I will say I probably don't require an answer to today, and maybe one question about probably the two different ends of the health spectrum. Probably my first one is on vaccinations, and I was looking at national data yesterday, which I get through being chair of the Health and Social Care Committee, and I think nationally flu vaccines delivery is broadly in line with where we were last year across the piece, but COVID is well down. And that got me thinking about that yesterday in terms of that vaccine apathy. But what caught my eye, and I have to say it only caught my eye this morning, so apologies for springing this on anybody. We actually say our clinics are very busy. Now, if our clinics are very busy, that suggests to me we don't have the capacity to do any more. So what would we be doing if we were above this 50-60% delivery level? So are we presenting the opportunities for people to be vaccinated? I would have raised that earlier, but it was just the narrative that caught my eye this morning. So that's my observation rather than the questions. I don't want to put anybody on the spot. And my second question was probably in relation to the 12-hour waits in ED. I'm assuming that's related to people we've made the decision to admit and they're waiting for a bed, but I just wonder if we could confirm or deny that observation. Thank you, David.
Thank you. I think Jennifer's going to come in with regard to vaccinations. I'll come to Catherine with regard to the ED.
Thank you. Yes. So 2 points I would pick up from that, which I think is really helpful. On the COVID front, there's been a little bit of a change in terms of eligibility, and that's caused some challenges. So we've had lots of people come through who are no longer eligible, and as we know, eligibility is defined by JCVI. So that probably reflects a little bit of that, but that's not a complacency statement. That doesn't mean that there isn't more that we could be doing. And as for your point around, so what is the model that we need to be working towards in that case in order to build a system that ensures that there is accessibility, easy access to for all of those that want to, and that we can drive the want to get vaccinated? That is the work that we are in the middle of doing. The clinics are busy. Yes, they are. But actually, your point is well made. We also need to think about what are the different models of delivery, therefore, and how can we take some of that learning from other health boards, but also some of the insight from some of the project and programme works that have been going on elsewhere. So it's something that's very much front and centre of our considerations actively at the moment.
Thanks, Jennifer. I think Anne's got a hand up. She may talk to capacity. I suppose the observation from the data is a busy clinic a good thing or a bad thing?
Yep.
You could interpret either. I think there is flexibility within capacity within clinics, so there is a responsive element to it. But I mean, you could probably articulate it better than me.
I'll have a go, but so yeah, exactly. The clinics are busy. that staff do a lot of work in a very short period of time, particularly in relation to the winter programme. However, there is still capacity, and we were given assurance around about that capacity just before Christmas when we did a very specific piece of work when we were concerned that the flu was coming over the hill earlier than we anticipated. And so what we wanted to do was kind of increase our public comms, and we wanted to make sure that if we did do that, were people going to be able to walk into clinics, and all of our clinics had capacity for walk-in people to do that, and we absolutely checked that out. So although I think it's the busyness is because of the winter programme, so lots and lots of vaccinations are happening in a very short period of time. However, there is still capacity, but exactly as David says, we work to a highly efficient model, and we don't want lots of gaps in people, vaccinators sitting about with nobody to vaccinate. That would be the wrong model. But I think, as Jennifer is saying, that the move towards the hybrid model too, we are looking at all of the assumptions about those and looking at the data about what does good look like in order that when we move forward, we have got the best model going there.
Thanks, Arlene. I'm going to come back to Catherine in a second around DD. Evan, did you want to talk about vaccinations, I'm assuming?
Going to talk about vaccinations and ED weight. So exactly as Arlene said, a busy clinic is a good clinic as far as I'm concerned. Within our Highland, we run vaccinations. We deliver across more sites than they do in Glasgow. So you've got this massive infrastructure for resources and the people. And so there's a huge trade-off there between access, which we know is what drives vaccination rates, and capacity, which we also need to kind of offer within the resources that we've got. So it's a challenge to get that right. In terms of long ED waits, it'll be a different position in Rakemore, I suspect, from our Highland perspective. As chief officer, I see all of the 4-hour breaches as they as they come through the system, and the majority of that for us is to do with transport waits for helimed or land transport or other acute sites, and I would rarely say we don't have any agency in that. Obviously, we can continue our collaboration with SAS, but that's certainly a challenge for us.
Thanks, Evan. Catherine?
Yeah, the majority of 12-hour waits, Jerry, relate to access block when we can't get people through, and that is literally boils down to bed capacity and how we resolve those problems on the day as best we can. It doesn't relate to staffing. We upped our staffing levels within our emergency departments, so we're comfortable that we've got the right staffing levels in place in those areas, but it very much does relate to our access block challenges across the system.
However, there is some good news in there, albeit it doesn't necessarily reflect in the numbers, because the same-day emergency care process that we're operating actually is turning around more and more patients within the day and avoiding admission for the patient and for the hospital. However, the timing of that isn't getting done within necessarily every time within the 4-hour period. So it doesn't quite tell the whole picture, but still is a very strong indicator in terms of the pressures within the system. Brian, can I come to you?
Thanks, David. I've got 3 questions in 3 different areas, sort of cause and effect questions, and almost in reverse order. In the emergency department and the long waits there, as a consequence of that, do we have patients parked in corridors adjacent to our A&E? And if we do, how many and how frequently? I'd be quite interested in knowing that. So that's that one. I guess the other one is on vaccination, so going around these hardy perennials. Do we correlate the data on our vaccinations with our staff absence for flu vaccines? So we've got our own staff, we know how many have been vaccinated, we also know who's off sick and for what. Really, my up both bits today is to actually do a little bit of research. I for one would be really curious to see what that looks like. And the third one is really back to, and I can see Gareth wincing about appraisals. And on appraisals, I guess there is a danger that we fall into that this is a process and then we measure the process and we lose sight of why we have it in the first place. And, you know, at the low figures we have, I'm tempted to be slightly sarky and say, does it make any difference? Should we just scrap it all as a very bad idea because we don't see the impact of it? Because in my experience, not in the NHS, appraisals was something the staff pushed for. They wanted the appraisal. It had some significance for them. And what I'm not hearing is, for all the staff that don't have appraisals, which is the majority of our staff, what are the implications for them? Okay, how do they get feedback about their performance? How do they know what's expected of them? How do they know they're valued in making a contribution? That's normally the type of interaction that takes place in an appraisal, well-structured appraisal. So I have a bit of a concern, both about the numbers, because it is a process, but also more about what are the implications for the organisation and how we're interacting with our staff and how are we providing direct one-to-one feedback to them. So these are my 3 questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. I mean, I think on the last item, I think that's a really interesting reflection in terms of the opportunity is for both staff and managers to have that discussion, and where is that discussion? How does it take place? The recording mechanism takes you into the process. So I think what we've said is we're going to take that item away and reflect on that. And I think your comments are very helpful to be considered as part of that. Vaccinations, Jennifer, I don't know if that is a question we have asked of ourselves as to whether there is any correlation between the two and whether our systems are sophisticated enough to be able to give us that.
I think it's a brilliant question, and it is absolutely the right one to be asking. It's the one we have asked ourselves. I'm not entirely clear whether our systems actually enable that readily, but I think that is helpful to have that actually as one for us to further explore just what is the art possible in terms of level of granularity and detail that is held in different parts of the system.
Yeah.
So we don't have the answer readily to hand at the moment.
And of course, it would be for educating staff as opposed to, because it's not compulsory, but it would just be for educating staff and say, look, you could have avoided being ill if you had taken up the offer of vaccination. So it's a really interesting one, definitely one we can take away and consider. Gavin, did you want to come in? And then I'll come to the last part around ED again.
Okay, it's a quick point, and I'm afraid it's around appraisals again, and it's to pick up on Brian's point. I suppose, given that this has been a hardy perennial and the rates, there's been an issue with the rates, I would like to revisit this come the return for the staff governance standards come December, and that might be a way of focusing minds to see if we can measure an improvement between now and then, because it's directly linked to the staff governance standards, and this might be a way of trying to move things forward a bit. Thank you.
Thanks, Gavin. And again, we'll take that suggestion and put that in with that group who's going to meet thereafter. Catherine, did you want to make comment on ED and if there is corridor treatment?
Yeah, so in response to your question, Brian, we haven't had any patients in corridors being treated in corridors. The way we manage when the hospital, Raigmore Hospital, comes under pressure, we have a system that is called non-standard bed spaces that we will risk assess according to the staffing levels that we have in the ward areas. So our ward areas have rooms that accommodate 6 people in Raigmore, and there are 4 of those rooms in the various wards that we accommodate patients in. So we would flex up in those rooms by 1 patient. That can give us an additional number of patients beyond our normal standard complement of up to approximately, I think, 36 to 38 patients. And that's how we manage it and flex and try to respond to peaks and ebb and flow in demand.
Thanks for your questions, Brian. Philip.
Yeah, thanks, David. I was hesitating whether I was going to come in this or not, and it's back to the appraisals. As the chair of the Staff Governance Committee, I would say that we've been wrestling with this for years. So this isn't something that's risen recently. This is something that we have not got a grip of for many, many years, and it's wider than staff governance. There is a direct issue with all of the directorates, which include all of the directors, and I think we need to broaden it. And Sarah's suggestion that we could meet is, I think, is a first step on that. The Staff Governance Committee, as Sarah knows, having been a previous chair, we've gone through many iterations of how we can resolve this, and we haven't managed to resolve that yet. So I think we need a wider, broader view about how we do this. And I think it's something that will not be solved overnight. And as I say, we've been wrestling with it for a long time. So I understand the folks' frustrations. It matches my own, and Steve, who's the vice. But yeah, I would say that we need to look at this at the highest level and broaden out rather than just being staff governance.
Thanks, Philip. Fiona, did you want to come in?
Yes, I thought probably given the number of people that have raised appraisals, it would probably be appropriate for me to do so. What I'm really thoughtful about is whether amongst the approach that Sarah outlined in her action, one of the things we might want to do is benchmark to other boards in Scotland and to see how other boards are getting on with this particular process and metric. Because, as we found in other parts of our operational delivery or other parts of our corporate services, looking at best in class often will give us insights or ideas that we've maybe not come up with within our own system, and there's a risk that we just keep going around the same ideas and solutions because it's the same people having the conversation about how we try and fix it. I'm thoughtful that within our iMatters report, the feedback that we get from staff is broadly consistent with other boards in Scotland across the whole range of metrics within iMatters. So obviously we've got areas where we do slightly better than some other boards and areas where we do slightly worse. But I don't pick up from iMatters per se a clamour for something that's missing any more than any other board. So I'd just be very interested in whether other boards have a similar challenge around appraisal and are running at similar rates, or if somebody's cracked this either by having a much more rigorous process or indeed having some type of approach in which staff feel motivated and keen to take up the opportunity, or have identified a way of ring-fencing capacity to achieve this. I don't want to jump to conclusions about how another board might have done it, but I think maybe that's one for Gareth and I to pick up through the HRD network in Scotland, is to go and do that benchmarking exercise and then immediately make friends with the couple of boards that are doing this with the most effective outcomes. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. Alex?
Yeah, just to add in on the appraisal, the question I asked earlier to Gareth, Boyd came back to me and said that doctors are incentivised. They're at almost 99% completion because they needed to get their medical licence. So as a part and parcel of the discussion, incentivisation, I think, is something that you should be factoring in. The industry I worked in, if you didn't do your performance review, you didn't get an extra pay. Simple as that. So it's something to think about.
Yeah, I think I would suggest for today that's probably not a path we're going to go down. I think what we may or may be able to do in this space is governed by our Wins for Scotland policies, and therefore the tools that are at our disposal aren't the same as what I've had in previous working life areas, and so therefore we're going to have to work within the parameters of what we are. But if there is incentive, we can look at other incentives other than the type you've described, and that's always worthy of a consideration. Fiona, did you want to come in?
Yeah, maybe just a couple of thoughts to add to your own, David. So I was going to make the point that obviously the way that the appraisal system is built is done on a national basis through national negotiating and terms and conditions. So that isn't really accessible to us to amend within one board area, it would need to go through the national groups. But I suppose when you're making that reference to our medical professionals, it's tied to, if you like, a regulatory standard rather than a monetary incentive, in the sense that that could be understood. So there is potential that Louise or other clinical execs or supporters could go and have conversations with other regulatory bodies around whether there is any interest, and maybe through the Nurse Directors Network, as to whether that has been considered and whether that would be something that we would want to support, given that differential, as you say, between our medical rates and rates we're seeing in other professional groups or wider workforce groups. But also, I think the conversation I was suggesting that myself and Gareth have through the HRD network is that if all boards are toiling with this, then it may be something we want to take a collective position as boards to bring into the national space as recommendation or for influence. So I don't think it's an idea that we can take forward individually, but I don't think we should lose sight of it as a concept that could help us in our way forward.
Thanks, Fiona. Gareth, briefly.
Yeah, very brief. It's just building on Fiona's point there, and I was at a national group around protected learning time. We should just close down that piece of work. We did have a conversation with staff side colleagues around that table in relation to appraisals, came up as part of the conversation. So I think one of the other things is to highlight the Scottish Workforce and Staff Governance, SWAG as it's referred to in Scotland, is a forum where that would be discussed in terms of whether this something needs to be revisited in terms of the approach to appraisals, and just so it's quite clearly articulated by staff side colleagues present that would be in the remit of SWAG to have those conversations. So that would probably, which has management around as well. So I think that once we've done some of that, I suppose, research in the background, we might want to consider where we go to have that conversation at a national level in terms of if there's challenges we're all facing or that we might want to address on a national basis.
Thank you. Thanks for your questions. We do appreciate the feedback. Some of these things we have to take away. Hopefully we've been able to provide some answers directly. And of course, there's sometimes more time within the subcommittees to discuss some of these items in detail. But thank you for the feedback as well. Chair, I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, David. I just want to reiterate that point, colleagues. You know, we do have the opportunity within staff governance to do a lot of this deep diving, and you don't have to be a member, non-execs. You can attend staff governance, and I might suggest that would be something to do if we want to discuss this in detail. I do appreciate the passion and the challenge that everybody's brought to that particular item. Just conscious that we have a very full agenda to get through, so we'll take that offline as I've suggested. But certainly in the future, if members are particularly interested in this, please do catch up with Philip and attend to staff governance committees, because we have much more dedicated time in that space to go into a level of detail. Thank you, David, for taking us through that. So we're being asked to note the update and take moderate assurance, assuming that we're all happy to do that. Okay, and David, still you, I'm afraid. Another performance item, just and a quick update on our operational improvement plan, please.
I'm going to ask Brian McKellar to present this. You're probably fed up listening to me so far. So Brian, take it away, please.
Thanks very much. So the operational improvement plan paper is on page 127 of your combined papers. So the OIP deliverables are a subset of our annual delivery plan, and we have established a bi-monthly reporting into FRPC. So I believe this is the first time the board has received an update from the operational improvement plan deliverables. But they will be very familiar to you in terms of Scottish Government's key deliverables for us and for all NHS boards across the 25-26 financial year. And so all the deliverables, of which there are 20 that we're measuring, are due for delivery by the end of March 2026. The appendix gives a sort of running play by play of where all the deliverables are at, but I think probably just important to highlight the two that, as at the 9th of December, when this report was pulled together for FRPC, there were two that were sitting at a delayed status. One of those is in relation to imaging and our requirement to improve performance to meet the 6-week target for new patients accessing radiology services. And the challenge we have within that, which you'll have seen through the IPQR, is the demands that we have, particularly for CT and ultrasound services across the board. And there are active discussions underway with both Scottish Government and other health boards as to how we can mitigate that demand that we're seeing and how we can move things forward. But at the time of writing this report, the fruit of those discussions was still outstanding, so it remains at delayed status. The second one was in relation to our AHP at Raigmore, which is part of the urgent unscheduled care portfolio. The time of writing this report, we were experiencing some challenges in terms of the model of delivery and ensuring the full recruitment to the posts that have been identified for that service. I'm happy to report that since that update on the 9th of December, we have taken a paper through EDG that has supported a recruitment plan that is being progressed operationally by the services, and it's hoped that deliverable will move from a delayed status to an at-risk status in the next reporting period. Those were the two I really wanted to highlight to the board today. We've of course been through FRPC with the detail, but what you see in the paper is a positive change in terms of the overall status of the deliverables on page 129. So I'll leave it there for any questions or comments that the board has to make. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. Muriel, I'll bring you in, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Brian, for the quality of and the clarity of the paper. You've highlighted a few of the challenges, and looking at the pie chart as well, and the graph underneath, we're not. I'm a bit confused as to why we're sitting at substantial as a assurance on this, and I'm wondering what I'm missing that you're or the team are confident that this is giving us substantial assurance.
David, I'll bring you in.
Firstly, that's our recommendation, and it's for the board to make that final arbiter in terms of decision. We have got 90% of these metrics either on track or slightly away from on track, but we're getting closer to the end of the year. You're going to see from both the updates, the 30th October to the 9th of December, that they are still improving. So I think all in all, it is a pretty positive report from where we are, and even the ones that are in red, then we're making progress on. So I think we've got a very good process in terms of overseeing all of these, both at a management level and at a governance level, and hence the reason that the recommendation would be for substantial assurance. But Alex, I don't know if you want to add any comment to that.
Yeah, thanks for that, David. Yeah, Muriel, we had that discussion at the FRPC, and for just that reason, this 40% at risk, and some of them are still, you're thinking, but it is definitely improving, and that's why we accepted and agreed with the substantial assurance at the point of the data.
Okay, happy if anybody else has got a particular view on the assurance level, and I'll maybe just leave that hanging for a little minute while I ask a question. And apologies if this was in there and I've just not quite picked it up. But can I just look to the future a little bit and what happens in the future? So obviously the operational improvement plan was introduced. We also have our ADP, our annual delivery plan. Conscious that also there's going to be a subnational element that that kind of weaves in the future, and we might not have that clarity yet, but I'm just asking early doors, what will the future of that look like? Do we know yet?
There's an easy answer to that, which is no.
No. Okay.
I think it's fair to say as it develops, there will be elements that will, just as you say, weave these things together. I think an operational improvement plan will be the method of which there are these given priorities that we've seen this year. So I think that's likely to repeat. But as for the other asks, there's clearly are asks at a subnational level in terms of programmes of work, which will have an effect on it. I would imagine that we probably will do an ADP again, because the ADP is our amalgamation of all the different things that we're trying to do across our, as a board, across these areas. And therefore it's quite a useful reference document to be able to have those. So it's likely that we'll have an ADP, even if government don't necessarily ask for it. So I think, but the definition of what's coming, you can imagine that the central planning fraternity have got quite a lot on their plate at the moment with regard to the reorganisations, and it's probably going to come at us late, and it's probably going to come at us with short timescales. But we are connected, so we will communicate to the board as soon as we're able to do so.
Okay, no, that's great. Thank you. Any other comments or questions with regards to the operational improvement plan? I mean, I suppose I just want to say, although I do recognise, Muriel, the challenge that you put in. I suppose just looking through the detail, it's also clear there's been a huge amount of work as well. So I think, yeah, the report gives a very balanced view, I think. So thank you, Brian, for putting that together in that way. Personally, I'm content with substantial assurance. I do appreciate I think Muriel has raised a really good point. Are members happy that we can take substantial, given, I suppose, what Alex has said about the additional scrutiny that's taken place? People happy with that? I can't actually see enough screens to see what people are doing. Okay, I'm getting some thumbs up. Okay, so I think we can take on board the concerns, Muriel, but we'll put it at the recommended assurance level at this time, and obviously we'll report on that again in the future. Okay, thank you, everybody. And so we've been asked to note, take substantial assurance, right? So we've done that bit. Good. Thank you, David and Brian. Thanks very much. So I'll move us on to item number 7 then, please. So Heleth, I'll invite you to talk to us about the financial assurance report, giving the month 8 position, please.
Thank you, Sarah. I will predominantly focus on this month 8 report, but we have now submitted month 9, so I'll just touch on some of the highlights of month 9 as well as I go through some of the report. But as you can see, the year-to-date position in month 8 is reporting a deficit of just over 41 million. And we're continuing to hold the forecast deficit of 40 million at month 8, in line with the SG expectations. The biggest risks to the position continue to be the adult social care gap and the ongoing discussions with Greater Glasgow and Clyde regarding the SLA charges, as Alec alluded to. At month 6, we identified a risk to the delivery of the full savings target, and a non-recurrent mitigation plan was put in to offset some of the risk in year. At month 9, we will actually reflect this within the detail of the savings and the trajectories, and we'll bring those mitigations in. But just to make the board aware that for the month 9 position, that adult social care gap was raised formally with Scottish Government and highlighted as a significant unachievable delivery of that risk. So it was more recognising it as an actual likelihood rather than just a risk. And a decision was taken to reflect that within our forecast at month 9 formally. So with agreement of some mitigating actions with Scottish Government and quite a deep review of our own position, we've got ongoing dialogue with the Highland Council as well, but we've agreed to move the forecast position in month 9 to an increase of 50 million deficit, but there is an expectation that further work will be undertaken with our partners to bring that down again before the year end. So we are taking those conversations forward. We're not at this point including anything for the GGC SLA uplift. There's ongoing discussion with Greater Glasgow around that, and the biggest concern raised actually is more around notification timescales process, as well as the data and being able to really be assured of value for money and the cost per item. So that work is also ongoing, but we have received an invoice for those costs from Glasgow. So there will be further conversations with our audit team as well around how we reflect that in our position and how we take that forward. So the main movements across our services since the last board meeting are in the partnership. There's a slight deterioration overall, it's not slight, of 850,000, but the majority of that is sat with the adult social care, which is worsened by about 1.1 million. And we have also seen some additional locum costs within the primary care, but we've also seen some benefits offset some of that as well. Within acute, there's been a small deterioration to the financial position in month 8, and that's across the board. Obviously, in months 9 and 10, we might see that deteriorate a little bit further with the flow issues and delayed discharge and snow and all those things that we've talked about earlier in the meeting that happened around December, January time. But we do have mitigations in place to offset some of those, in conversations with government around how we use some of our funding, maybe a little bit different to offset some of those as well. Within our support services, we've seen a small improvement of 67,000 in month 8, but there was a bigger improvement than that just before between month 6 and 7 of just under 600,000. And that's predominantly within the corporate services and estates budgets. In Argyll and Bute, we continue to see an improvement in their forecast, and that's every month, and we're still anticipating that Argyll and Bute will deliver a break-even position at the end of the year, recognising that's difficult and there might be a need to utilise some outstanding reserves. The value and efficiency savings, despite having a significant gap in our savings delivery, we are still continuing to see some progress, and we are delivering a little bit more every year, and that every month, and that forecast is getting better. Within capital, the spend is still a bit slow to come through, but it has increased by about 1.5 million since the last reported position in month 6, and it's not unusual to see our capital spend go up dramatically in the last quarter of the year, and we are still projecting to be on track to spend our capital allocation. So I just want to move you on then to the budget setting slides that we've added in. So we've just provided some highlights of the budget announcement for the NHS, which effectively confirms 2% uplift towards pay and non-pay, with all of the pay agreements being topped up above that 2% to cover the full pay award uplifts as they have been agreed, and then any future agreements we will get further allocations for. The Agenda for Change Reform, we will be receiving an additional 150 million, which takes our full allocation up to 300 million across Scotland, with NHS Highland getting an NRAC share of that. So for us, that will be around 20 million. So we do know that this doesn't cover the full cost of replacing all lost hours and the band 5 to 6 and protected learning time, but it's the allocation we have at the moment. We have to work through that as an organisation and working with other boards as well and Scottish Government around what the full impact of that might look like in the next financial year. The sustainability and deficit support is an ongoing part of the pyramid of support that government have announced this year. So we again have a share of 150 million non-currently. That's reduced from the 25-26 allocation. The Scottish Government are effectively tapering that each year, with expectation of boards returning to balance by the year 28-29. And policy and programme funding, similar to this financial year, they will be based on submissions and supporting plans. So we've had limited information around any additional funding for policy decisions at this point, but we do suspect it'll be on that kind of submissions and request basis rather than on an NRUC basis. And for the capital, we've had confirmation of our formula funding remaining as it is for this financial year, and confirmation that the business continuity plans that we submitted and that were approved this year will continue. And for the significant capital programme elements, there's confirmation that the funding for the Belford Hospital is still in the budget for next year. So I've just given some the dates around our submissions to government, but just to say from our internal governance perspective, for the first draft, our budget will go to our internal exec directors group on Thursday. The submission to Scottish Government is Monday the 2nd, so it's very tight turnaround. And then the submission information detail will be shared with FRP for full scrutiny on the 5th. Then for the final submission, we will make sure that there's some internal governance where FRP and board get to review and scrutinise our position prior to submission to Scottish Government, and hopefully, all being well, ideally that we'll be able to formally present the submission on the 31st of March to the formal board meeting, but that will depend slightly on the response we receive from Scottish Government as it has in previous years. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Helene, and thanks for laying out that timeline, because I was getting a bit confused about the order of things. That's actually really helpful to understand that process, or to be reminded of that process. So thank you for that. Okay, I'm going to open up for questions and comments for Helene, please. Stunned them into silence. Karen, I'll bring you in, please.
Thank you, and thanks, Helene. I welcome the way that it was laid out around values and efficiencies with North Highland and Argyll and Bute. It made it really clear to see, and I just wonder moving forward if that's something that could be, just for those of us that are more simple of brain when it comes to this stuff, just to be really clear around where it's much more around the north, that's articulated. I know it's in there, but it's sometimes it takes you 2 or 3 reads before you like, oh, that's the north, rather than, and there's Argyll and Bute at the bottom. And it's not about going into the detail of the Argyll and Bute finances, but given this is our opportunity, as we have with the IJB, to kind of look at that in that kind of rounded way. I just think it would be helpful, particularly as we move forward and these discussions around finances are going to become increasingly challenging, aren't they, for all of us. So if that's something that perhaps could be looked at in future iterations of the report as it's being developed. But thank you.
Yes, no problem. Happy to do that, Karen. And just to say as well, we are strengthening or looking to strengthen our team supporting the value and efficiency. We have had confirmation of some additional funding from Scottish Government, part of that pyramid of support. And our intention will be to put a bit more capacity around the value and efficiency team.
Thanks, Helene. I wonder if you could just say a little bit more about the Glasgow SLA discussion that's ongoing, and recognise that's a very kind of there's 2 bits to it, isn't it? There's the bit that we're currently discussing with them and that particular invoice, but also just keen to understand if there have been any discussions about the future of the SLAs, and again mindful of wider conversations about the changes nationally and the subnational arrangements. I don't know if you have any intelligence about how SLAs might look in the future, as well as what we're sort of discussing as a current risk. Thanks.
Yes, happy to, Sarah. So the current conversations are directly with Glasgow around their charging and their SLA, and I think they are being quite clear that at this point in time each board does have its own accountability, and we need to do that on a board by board basis and discussion, which is fine and right, but that does have to be a fair and open and transparent process as well, which is the position we're getting through with Glasgow is understanding exactly what they are proposing to charge us for, which I don't think we have clarity on at the moment, which is why I'm struggling to accept that charge as being a fair and a best value charge, I suppose. So that's where we are currently with Glasgow, and we're having ongoing dialogue. We met with them last week, and we're planning to put another meeting in the diary just probably for myself and their Director of Finance in the next week or so as well. And as I said, there'll be ongoing discussion with audit around the appropriateness of the treatment and how we take some of this forward. We also have been given an early indication from Glasgow that they will be sending us our planning letter for next year, which will be for the full costs of the SLA uplift as they see it. So we do need to consider how we respond to that as well. So we've got this financial year to consider, but also how we put that into our financial planning for next year. And given that we're currently disputing the value because we can't substantiate it, then what do we play into the following year? With regards to national, we don't really have any guide or clarity on how that's going to work going forward. There has been some initial conversations around the need to maybe look at the SLA charging, but there's no progress been made to that, and the boards at the moment are still quite clear of their own accountability. So until there's something national coming through, everyone's still working on their own internal processes. That might change as we start to work through some of the different specialties and some of the areas within the subnational working. But at this point in time, there isn't an expectation, there isn't anything set out formally to say that we are going to review the SLA methodology. But my view is it needs to happen, and we can't really work on a subnational basis effectively with the current system that we have.
Thanks, Celeste. That's helpful. And I suppose I'm mindful that SLAs get used all over the country, but some boards, including our own, are more dependent on them, more at risk, as I suppose you just described. Okay, thank you. That's helpful, and we'll see how that evolves. Brian, I'll bring you in, please.
Thanks. Hi, Helen. I guess my question is, trying to phrase it correctly, how worried should we be at this juncture about 26, 27? As we look at what you're presented, looked at the non-recurrent component of the current year savings, look at the reduction in sustainability funding, look at the SLA with Glasgow as a cost pressure depending on the outcome, and no doubt a raft of other issues. So I'm sitting here starting to kind of think the direction of the graph or the distance from balance is going to grow in 26, 27 at this juncture rather than stabilise or go down the way. And I think it is important so that we can shape some of our future discussions about what the board can do to support you in terms of establishing the PMO and supporting initiatives that are coming up, and have discussion about some of the risks that we will have to manage in 26, 27 sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Unfortunately, I don't have the figures to share with you. We are still working through the detail, but as you've done, I've totted up all of those non-recurrent impacts from this financial year and the SLA impact, adult social care, and some of the gaps there as well. We know that the living wage funding potentially is a little bit light as well, and we're working through that with our council colleagues. So I do suspect, as you say, that we are going to be opening in a deteriorated position, and we will have to work out how to work our way through that. But we can have that initial conversation, I think, at the next FRP meeting. I will have that detail to present to you, and we can then start to strategize a little bit more around how we approach our reductions for the next years and so.
Go on, Brian, I can see you want to come back in.
No, I'm not. It's just a flippant comment. So that's quite an advert. I think you're going to get quite an audience at the next Finance Management Committee. So yeah, I'm certainly trying.
The more the merrier.
Thank you.
Well, absolutely, and similar to the comments I made earlier around staff governance, you know, we have membership of our committees, but absolutely, I would encourage board members to attend committees that might not normally attend to get that to get that more detailed, granular understanding and do that detailed assurance bit as well. Fiona, did you want to come in on that point before I bring in Janice?
Yes, I was like Brian, just toying about how flippant I should be in response to what he described as a flippant question. I suppose the bit I wanted to add, maybe just with a bit more seriousness, is that the position that NHS Highland are in and those cost pressures into next year are daunting to consider. But in all seriousness, to me, the act of leadership is about moving beyond a feeling of worry or the emotion that can come from seeing something in front of you that's a significant challenge. And then with my team working through how we're going to step up and respond to that if it's a bigger step than we've had to take before. And we know that we're well supported and challenged by this board who have come around us, certainly over the last, well, now nearly 2 years of my leadership. And so I suppose I want to say I'm not sure worry would be the thing we would need to do, even if the scale of the challenge is growing rather than stabilising, because we will have to plan action that is sufficient to the scale of the challenge, and that will take cool heads and clear leadership to move us through and to come and bring those proposals forward through committee and into the board and through in consultation with the public about how we reshape NHS Highland to be able to be the size that we are able to afford whilst maximising the outcomes for our population. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. Just to add to that, and this is a very practical bit, but I feel like the timing might be right. We do also, we were discussing earlier this week, the committee chairs, that we have committee self-assessments coming up. It's something we do annually. It's an important time for us to reflect and, you know, if necessary, adjust what we're doing. And I suppose as this picture becomes clearer, I think there's an opportunity, Heleth and Alex, for you guys, you know, through FRP to just use that committee self-assessment process to see, you know, is there something we need to tweak in terms of the governance? Do we need to refresh anything? Obviously, we had stepped up FRP to a monthly meeting previously, and that's, you know, possibly still the approach that we want to take. But I think there's a good opportunity just to see if we still feel we're looking at the right things in the right way, and if we need to adjust any of those lenses accordingly. But I'll let you guys discuss that offline, but just conscious that we have that opportunity coming up as well. Janice, I'll bring you in, please.
Thanks, Chair. So this might be really trying to simplify things too much, and I know these are really wicked issues, but I wondered whether it might just be signposts made to a committee, but where the connections between the supplementary staff and the vacancies, the sickness, how much. It's not easy to fill vacancies, and we're never going to do that. There's not the workforce out there, probably. But if, say, for instance, we made 10% difference in our vacancies and filled them, the ones that are hard to fill, is that directly related to the supplementary staff? And would it be a much bigger difference in the amount we would save from supplementary staff and by increasing? I just don't have a handle on. I quite often see the words that vacancies are part of the mitigation for the supplementary staff, and that vacancies are part of our savings. Obviously, they can't fill them, but I just don't see the kind of join up. So I know it's a really wicked question, and there's no easy answers.
Thanks, Janice. I can see both Heleth and Gareth want to come in. I don't know who wants to go first. Gareth?
I'll give it a bash. So, I think it's probably important to focus on the work we've done to reduce agency, so higher cost supplementary staffing, and distinctly different from bank usage. It is possible to get into the level of detail to understand where our gaps are, and we can quantify supplementary staffing usage as a cover, and it will be covering vacancies and sickness absence, etc. I think probably in terms of financial sustainability, there's two parts to this. One is the efficiency and productivity perspective in terms of the short term. What can we do to reduce reliance on supplementary staffing and controls? So agencies being one of those things where that's if you like, almost a discretionary spend, where if we can turn the tap off, then we can reduce our costs. It doesn't necessarily. It means we're switching to supplementary staffing in terms of bank instead, which is a lower cost option. So that's something. It's more within our gift, if you like, to apply controls on that. We've been doing a fair amount on that. You've rightly highlighted that vacancies persist as an issue, and the supplementary staffing bank. If we could move more people off bank into substantive roles, that might be a solution, but that's not what everybody chooses to do in terms of working style. So that's one aspect, is looking at what can we do in kind of that regular housekeeping, looking at maximising opportunities for reducing the cost of supplementary staffing. I think the wider issue for us is around reshaping our workforce, and that needs to be thought of in parallel to where does that need to come from, a redesign of services and delivery of services. And that's probably the more wicked. So that's the point I've been making at national level repeatedly, is that workforce planning has been based predominantly and conceptually over the last, I would say, certainly my tenure and 7 years of being a HRD, but well before that, has very much been based on a growth model, that services are going to grow and we're going to look, and that we know that's a continuing mindset, if you like, and that all that does is increasingly draw on a labour market that's not growing at the same pace, maybe, but the demand for staff in healthcare is growing. So that mismatch you've highlighted quite clearly is going to continue. It's going to keep driving. Can we look at different models of delivery that are going to work within the resources we have available? And I don't think it's just about a finance perspective in terms of the money. It's thinking about it in the context of what labour market do we have in Scotland, and how much of that proportion of that labour market are we going to get a slice of that could come into health and social care. We've probably maximised it as much as we can. There's definitely a deficit. So we're going to have to think about how do we reshape our services to meet that actually slice of the labour market. Because I think you've quite rightly highlighted that, Janice, it's a wicked problem in that, we can't just assume we're going to keep having more and more people coming into the labour market to fulfil these vacancies, which have grown over a period of time. So that's the real meat of what we've got to get into, and we need to kind of reduce our requirement for staffing. I think it's probably the aspect of it. The advantages to some extent that we have are that isn't about getting rid of people, because we want to keep people in our workforce and we want to keep the people we've got. We've got gaps in our workforce that we could potentially address by redesign and delivering things differently. So it's not. Hopefully that helps in terms of understanding where we put our focus and our effort.
Thanks, Gareth. That was really well explained. And Helene, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to come in a bit more from a financial angle. So I suppose when you look at the financial position overall, our paid budgets as they stand are not overspending. So that just evidences the level of vacancies that we have. There is a risk then that we fill vacancies where we're not using supplementary staffing. So our cost trajectory could actually go up. And then conversely, I guess we could bring agency staffing down, but some of that as well is, as you said, you kind of alluded to, that it is offsetting some of our sickness rates, because our budgeted establishment is based on an expectation of sickness, and if we exceed that, then that's going to be pressure if we then bring staffing in behind it. And then there are areas where our locum costs, or I'd say within our medical staffing, the cost there of filling vacancies is really high. And that is more around our very fragile services. So that's not really a service where we can take those people out, and we know that recruitment are extremely challenges, which is why we don't need to locum as it is. So there's that whole rounded thing, I guess, and the bit that Gareth's talking about. As part of the budget setting process, one of the things I have asked my team to do as well is to try and work out, and it's not easy, is to try and work out, if we filled all of our vacancies, what would our financial position look like? But then you do have to consider there would still be some level of supplementary staffing to fill things like the sickness, maternity leave, all that kind of stuff. So how do you work out what that reasonable level of supplementary staffing should be on a full establishment? Because my suspicion is, and it's probably not a surprising suspicion because the level of our deficit, is that if we fully recruited, we would still be in a deficit position because we've set services above our financial envelope.
Thank you. That's really helpful, both.
Thanks, Helle. That's very interesting. And Brian, I'll bring you in, please.
Sure, thanks. It is a really interesting conversation. And while it's been going on, I've just been doing a quick ChatGPT question about Scottish female working age workforce. So it's quite a startling percentage. If you take health and social care, okay, and it is qualified, but something around 25 to 26% of the existing working age population already are working in our domain. So in one sense, I'm not surprised we're struggling to find any more, because that's quite a heady percentage. So I'm absolutely with Gareth in the sense of we need to move. If Scottish Government won't grasp that nettle, we need to do it, and we need to start doing our own work to say what will stuff look like that's different here. Because one thing I will guarantee, having been doing this for quite a while, is that fast forward 5 years, and if we don't have an intervention, we'll be having the same conversations, only the numbers will be bigger. Okay, so it's screaming out for some innovation, brain power, and collective kind of dynamism to move this forward. Regrettably, I'm not quite sure what that looks like, but I'm sure we have the capability to at least start dissecting the problem and coming up with solutions if we pose it correctly. Okay.
Yeah, well summed up, Brian. I'm going to take Karen next, please.
I can't find the thing in the weekly roundup, but there was a really great launch of the work placement scheme for and I've seen that work incredibly well in another part of the world, and so I think that is something, that's that innovation approach that other jurisdictions have taken and ran really well with, and that bit about shifting the focus of employment, that people recognising their employability. Gareth is going to come and tell us what it's actually called. Apologies, I can't remember. I was trying to look it up. I was too slow. But I think that kind of example of this is a way to show people actually you could work somewhere different, just because it's traditionally been a female or a male-led area. Actually, there's other ways, that people can be employed within the organisation, and really interesting careers across the system. So I really hope that is something that as an organisation is picked up, and we end up with too many placements looking for applications in some ways to begin with, because it shows that the organisation is really interested in hosting these young people and school leavers as well. So yeah, thank you.
Well, Gareth, what's it called?
Oh, I suppose it relates back to our employability strategy. So there's a number of strands in there, and we had a very productive conversation at HRDs last week, and from the Youth Academy colleagues in NES. However, I would say that there's definitely, we should be doing as much as we can to continue to make health and social care an attractive place to come and work, and to maximize the opportunities for people to gain that opportunity locally, because we know if we can keep people in the area, then that's we're likely to retain them. So there's a whole raft of things we can do strategically as an organisation around that. But one of the other points I made at HRDs last week comes back to my other point, and Brian's picked up on it as well, is we have to be very mindful of our own local labour market influences, and we are around the table with Highland Council and other partners, because we've got to be aware of the huge it's only a finite labour market, and there are other significant draws on that labour market, and coming down the line, offshore renewables is going to draw a lot from the local employment market in the future. So we just need to be thoughtful about what is good for one area of the economy, and our local economy may also be something that has a potential to have a risk for us, but also comes back to conversations that we've been having around our, I suppose, as a board and as a NHS Scotland, our social responsibility to think about what proportion of the public purse do we utilise, and therefore also what proportion of the working population are we going to try and draw into an ever-increasing health and social care system. And that's the real challenge for us to think about. Okay, we need to deliver things differently. So for me, I keep making the point at the national level that workforce planning is probably the wrong terminology. We need to be thinking about service planning and service redesign, and from that comes your workforce plan for the future. So, and that we need to set principles as to what we're trying to achieve here, and that's part of it. And I think Hyleth has already mentioned today, our challenges are around it's relatively easy to spot some of our critical areas that are vulnerable. So some of those, and that's where the high cost agency and locum tends to come from. And some of the things that drive that, the things that I suppose we also need to be thoughtful about. There's a huge volume of activity that doesn't necessarily come onto our radar because it's business as usual. And our challenge as an organisation is to say, are we maximising our opportunities for productivity and efficiency to be able to make sure we're spending every pound wisely? Now that's a conversation we're having the executive team in terms of how we balance that out to reshape the delivery, because one of our biggest components is pay. And if we want to look at a sustainable future, both from a perspective of finance and from workforce availability, we probably need to also be systematically going through our organisation, looking at, can we deliver different service models, not just to the critical areas, but the areas where we've got large volumes of staff, and think about how we utilise that staff. Can it be shaped differently? Can it be reduced over time? Those sorts of things. So the conversation we're having at national level is it's about reshaping our workforce. And coming back to Brian's point, I think the thing we probably need to pay attention to is, will subnational and other approaches to this help us tackle some of these thorny issues around services that could be delivered in a different way, and those that need to stay locally? That's the thing we're going to have to balance as an organisation, is how delivering differently might be collaborating with other boards and delivering services on a regional or national basis, but also balancing that against our local population requirements as well. So as people have noted, it's not without its challenges.
Thanks, Gareth. And we've maybe gone slightly off piece, but I think that's a really, really helpful conversation and framing that in the bigger picture. Thank you. Okay, just to sort of bring us back to the finance paper then. So just picking up all the points that we've discussed, but we are being asked to examine and consider the content of that report and take limited assurance at this time. Happy that we've done that. Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm going to move us on then to item number 8. So this is the annual performance report for Argyll and Bute. So you'll remember we took the annual performance report for North Highland last time. This is here with us to complete that picture. And I'm going to ask Evan to speak to this one, please.
Thank you, Chair, and hello from Argyll and Bute. Confirmed that the storm is closing in, but I'm on battery power, so we should be fine. So this is the annual APR, annual performance report, and that's presented here for oversight of services delegated to Argyll and Bute. It's really important to note this is for the period 24 to 25, so there's a bit of a time lag here. It's not really that current information. It's presented here as a statutory duty of the IJB to produce a performance report. And part of the reason for the unusual delay is the national data for the national health and wellbeing outcomes, which are kind of core to what we're trying to achieve within the IJB. They weren't available till quite late on, so we saw a draft version of this report at the August IJB, and it's now here for sign off, and it goes to both partners. So the report sets out our performance and priorities against the Joint Strategic Plan. You'll see in the appendix that Joint Strategic Plan is provided there with the kind of service level plans. I think probably just the main thing we start with here is just a thanks to all of our staff who go about delivering these outcomes day in, day out. The core of this performance report, I'm just hearing that I've not got great sound. Is that a little better? Oh, great. The core of this report is the National Health and Wellbeing Outcomes, and it's useful to note that 5 of the 9 of these sit for our scores above the national averages, so that's a good place to be. And then that's supplemented with our internal performance management framework, which is an evolving set of measures that help us at head of service level and reporting up to the IJB describe what we're trying to achieve in relation to the Joint Strategic Plan and how far we are getting there. You note that a number of these are not on track, but I think it's also worth noting that these are aspirational measures that we have set our own targets for and are difficult targets to achieve. Nonetheless, there's work ongoing around that into this year. Just to recap those 4 strategic priorities, they're about choice and control and innovation, early intervention enablement, and then kind of very community focused outcomes around living well and active citizenship and community co-production. I won't go through the measures in detail. Happy to take any questions. I'll take the report as read, but just to contextualize some of it, the delay isn't helpful in terms of this, where you're seeing this data. So for instance, the CAMS reported sort of achievement is at 57%, but actually we're now meeting the 90% target for CAMS, which is a much better place to be. Other areas, of course, there's different challenges compared to what we're presenting in the 2024-2025 period. So our delayed discharge position has actually worsened into this year, recognising, I think, some of those service and financial pressures we've heard about today. But broadly speaking, there's strong performance against some of those kind of big strategic brushstrokes. So our increase in telecare continues. Our A&E target continues to be a high performer around that 95% target. The number of unpaid carers we're supporting is increasing, recognising the absolutely vital role they provide in our system. And waiting lists for things like AHP services have increased. There's also persistent challenges, and we recognise some of the review periods around our care at home packages. There are a significant challenge there, and linked to some of our challenges around flow. Similarly, adult support and protection remains a challenging issue for us, reflecting the small and fragile nature of our teams. And the target here is around GT2 inquires completed. Similarly, some of the financial position, the report notes that in 2024-25, as Helen has mentioned, reserves were used to meet some of the gap, and those reserves are no longer available going into the next financial year. So we're in a very different context there. So I'll finish there and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Evan, and thank you for explaining. You're right about the sort of the lag and what that means. So I certainly, when I was reading the report, was very careful to bear that in mind, that it was sort of a peek into history as opposed to a contemporary reflection of performance. Thank you. I might actually just invite Graham in as chair of the IJB, if Graham wants to say anything on this as well, recognising that this has already been through a significant amount of scrutiny through the IJB. And I just wonder, Graham, if you wanted to add any comments.
Yes, I think perhaps to just emphasise about the work that we're doing on the public health, and is I think we're really keen to try and build on the capabilities that are there in Argyll. And when things are challenging, these are, you do feel the pressure on these. So we're very much keen to build on that. As Evan has suggested, it's somewhat historic. It does seem to move fairly quickly. A lot of the things that are happening, sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse. But there are, and we keep reminding ourselves of this. Argyll's a great place to live, and we want to try and make it even better by what the Health and Social Care Partnership contributes.
Thank you, Graham. Karen, I'll bring you in, please.
Thank you, and I would echo Graham's points about it being a great place to live. The storm's heading past my house now, which is lovely. I just wanted to just comment on some of the future demand issue, and recognise the amount of effort that's gone into detailed analysis of future demand, which will support our work moving forward. And I think that's been really welcome, because it provides an evidence base for some difficult decisions when we see it laid out in front of us in the stark way that we have seen it, but with confidence in the analysis that's gone on. That's been it makes a difficult decision slightly easier if you have some confidence in the data that you've been provided. And the other thing, because it's topical, is within the appendix is the work of the Alcohol and Drug Partnership in Argyll and Bute. And for the last couple of years that I've been involved in the IJB, to see the development of that has been really powerful. And similar to comments that Louise made about the work of the partnership in the North, I've found the work inspirational, compassionate, and evidence informed, and that is what we want to see as board members sitting on the IJB. So I think it's hopefully that kind of bookends that story that we have in this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. That's really helpful to hear those reflections. Brian, I'll bring you in, please.
Thank you. So Evan, mine's a slightly more specific question. So I think your last sentence was about, and there are no more reserves, i.e. the reserves are depleted. So I would be quite curious to see to what level in the current year have those reserves been utilised, and what's their journey to depletion look like? Because that has been the make way, I'm guessing, to financial balance. So I'm wanting to try and get a sense of materiality associated with that.
Happy to come back in the chair. Thanks, Brian. I'll preface this with this is a slightly peculiar forum in the IJB. I have a kind of a team of my kind of senior leadership team support me answering these questions, as kind of the kind of wider exec team is here. I'm answering questions for the whole of Argyll and Bute for all disciplines, so you'll forgive the kind of lack of expertise. But just to kind of give you a broad overview, so within in this year, within and actually over the past couple of years, there's been £3 million in both years, so £6 million in total of reserves used on the social care side to meet that gap, and that was those were reserves that were available to us through a windfall through the Strathclyde pension fund. So what that demonstrates on the social care side of things, we have been spending unsustainably for the past 2 years. That falls out this year. On the health side, it's about 4 million of reserves that are going to be used to kind of
balance the budget this year, which again potentially are not available next year. So I hope that gives a flavour of the scale. There's also the additional component of the GG&C charge, which almost puts those reserves into a kind of insignificant level in terms of the scale of that challenge. But I hope that kind of, it's maybe not fully the question you asked, but can certainly work with my Director of Finance to get a fuller answer.
Lovely, thank you, Evan. So yeah, and I hope it is a lengthy report, but it is well worth the read. There's a huge amount of detail in there. I would encourage people to go through it fully if you haven't already had the opportunity to before today's meeting. Thank you, Evan. So I'm just checking here. Obviously, this is just coming to us for noting because it's formal governance route. It's through the IJB. So I think we can do that. And I just wanted to kind of echo others. I think massive thank you and well done to the staff that are working in such challenging conditions. And you know, we've heard some of the risks and issues explained today. So I think we have to really celebrate the good work that's going on there, but recognise the challenge that lies ahead. And noting your point, Evan, about the lag in reporting and what that means for what we're looking at today. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, thanks for that. I'm going to slightly tweak it. I think we're a little bit behind schedule. I'm going to suggest that we break for lunch now because I want to eat my notebook. So let's meet back here in half an hour. Thank you.